You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
And welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. Former Lubbock City Councilman Gary Boren was one of 8 people named to the Brazos River Authority's Board of Directors. That appointment coming from Governor Abbott. Boren will help coordinate the use and conservation of water in and out of the Brazos until February of 2025. Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller announced this week that his federal counterparts with the USDA have released the new rules for farmers to grow industrial hemp. Groups have already been pitching the idea of growing hemp to a lot of South Plains farmers, and Miller says his office should be able to submit an official plan for legal growing in Texas within the next 30 days, and then a licensing plan should be ready early next year. And Lubbock City leaders taking some suggestions this week about what topics they should make a priority as the city moves forward. Some of the biggest issues we're talked about include public safety and economic development and quality of life. Mayor Dan Pope says that while no decisions were made, of course, it's important to have these brainstorming meetings.
Only once a year or so that we take a full day and devote it to working on our priorities, what we need to be working on, what's the future look like. And so our staff's done a bunch of work prior to today, which allows us to best address or best have these kind of conversations.
And if you weren't able to make it to that meeting, city leaders say you can always contact them with your ideas or concerns. You know, on this show last week, Lubbock Congressman Jody Arrington echoed what we've heard from a lot of Republicans in the House about the impeachment inquiry, that the process of evidence gathering done by Democrats should be done in the open for all of us to see. Well, they're about to get that, a vote by the Democrat-controlled House this week to formalize the impeachment process and make the ongoing investigation open to the public. And KMAX Anna Warnke is in Washington with more.
The House of Representatives officially moved the impeachment inquiry into President Trump to the next phase.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
For weeks, House Democrats have used closed-door hearings to investigate complaints that President Trump was pressuring Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says those findings are about to be public.
The public can see the facts for themselves.
Texas Republican Will Hurd is on the Intelligence Committee. He says Democrats have kept his party in the dark.
In my time in Congress, I've never had to do something like that.
And even with the new process, Hurd says Democrats aren't being as open as they should be.
The word that was used in the piece of legislation is may. May means you can or cannot do something. When you want to compel someone to do something, the word is shall, and shall was not used in this.
The House Intelligence Committee is now tasked with investigating the president's relationship with Ukraine and presenting those findings to the House Judiciary Committee, who will then decide whether or not to impeach the president. The White House released a statement saying the president has done nothing wrong and the Democrats know it. Texas Republican Michael McCall says Democrats have already made up their minds.
I fully anticipate that there will be articles sent to the floor to impeach the president.
The process could happen quickly. With holidays, Congress only has 16 legislative days left this year. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnke.
All right, Anna, thank you so much. Got to spend 5 good minutes now with Texas Tech Associate Professor of Political Science and our expert on all things we don't understand about any of this, Dr. Seth McKee. Good to see you again, my friend.
Good to be here.
All right, help us be clear a little bit about the impeachment process as we get into all this. Republicans have sort of argued that the procedures to this point anyway have been unfair. Is there any constitutional point to be made there at all, or on how things have been handled to this point?
Sure. There's not much there to defend for Republicans. In fact, if you look at the latest procedures, Republicans themselves, when they were in the majority in the House, set them up when you think about the Benghazi hearings. But the other thing is, if you think about how Democrats are going about this, there's a reason you would start behind closed doors. And the reason for that is you don't want potential witnesses to corroborate their testimony. You want their truth as they see it to come out individually. We're now beyond that, so it's sort of, you know, who cares at this point, because the House voted to do public hearings now. So it's sort of an old argument at this point.
Yeah, the president also gets a little bit more of a legal rebuttal, as it were, and legal is a little dicey in this situation too, but he gets a little bit more rebuttal if this gets to a trial in the Senate here, right?
That's correct, and it doesn't seem like he cares to take that approach or even entertain it. But the other thing about this whole process is, if you look at the House of Representatives, who starts an impeachment inquiry and then votes to impeach, It's a majoritarian institution,
Right.
which means if you've got one more vote than the other party, you can do it any way you want.
And there is no setup for an impeachment inquiry has to be set up in a certain way and include certain things. It's kind of whatever you want to do.
There's none. And that's the biggest problem here, is that at the end of the day, Republicans are going to have to answer to the charge. And the charge is a serious one. I mean, the charge is to say, look, we have what is an ally, a head of a country that's an ally to us, that's under attack from what we think is an adversary in Russia. And is it the case that military aid is being upheld or withheld unless you find dirt on a political rival of the president's?
Right.
I mean, this is unprecedented. We've never seen this. Watergate was all domestic, if you will.
Right.
This is bringing in a foreign country. It makes me think back to George Washington and his farewell address and saying, be careful with foreign countries in general. But his biggest thing when he left office was parties, political parties. I mean, you can't be wedded to a party more than your country. We are now. I think if you were to turn the tables, if Donald Trump happened to be a Democratic president and Republicans had won the midterm in 2018, I think we'd be in the exact situation we're in now. And so I don't think there's any courage on either side. I think it's the fact that Donald Trump has 80-some% approval in most congressional districts that Republicans represent.
Right.
Most of the senators in these Republican states who are Republicans, unless that support erodes among the mass electorate, they're not going to show any courage.
And to that point, there are folks saying that this could actually be a good thing politically for Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
Can we wrap our head around that one, I guess, as far as we look ahead to the primaries and then the general in 2020?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, politics is so hard to predict just moving forward in time. But I don't see how it's a positive. I mean, there used to be talk, well, he was daring, you know, Democrats to impeach him. Nobody wants to be impeached, okay? Now, look, 20 Republican votes among senators would be needed to go with 45 Democrats and 2 independents to remove him from office. It's 2/3 of the Senate to convict. That's a high hurdle. Are you really going to get 20 Republicans who are feeling the heat enough? And so he will do what he did with the Mueller report, which is say, okay, well, if I'm not convicted, if he stays in office, it's a victory for him. But all through this process, even though we don't know what the future holds, how do you defend what he did? And that is the burden of Republicans, is that they have to continue to defend what I believe is indefensible.
Make that public case one way or the other here. Are Democrats on their end banking on the fact that we're all just going to eventually get tired of all of this and just vote him out of office one way or the other?
I think so. I mean, I think so. And I think, you know, yeah, were there Democrats who wanted to impeach him from day one? Of course. But was that most of the Democratic Party? No. I think Nancy Pelosi was sort of determined after the Mueller report came out to not move forward. But when this came out, when the whistleblowers' information came out, it was one of those situations in American history where you say, can we also ignore this? And I think that the Speaker of the House said, no, I can't. And so at some level, of course, it's political. But at another level, substantively, it is a charge that another branch of the government has to do what they think is right.
It's amazing stuff. Dr. Seth McKee, keep the phone close. We're going to need you to come back and explain this as this goes on.
Sure.
But we appreciate it today.
Thank you.